Now, the average pay for top business leaders has gone up by nearly half in the past year. Research from Incomes Data Services says the directors of FTSE 100 companies have seen their total earnings rise by 49%, while the pay of the typical private sector employee has gone up by just 2.6%. Well, joining me from our Southampton studio is the Managing Director of Headhunters, Purcell & Co., John Purcell. And here in the studio is Chris Roebuck, Professor of Transformational Leadership at Cass Business School in London. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us. John Purcell, if I could start with you, 43% in the last year. Is that justified?
Well, it looks pretty hard to justify it on the face of it, but one of the things that the averages hide is the fact that their actual salary increased only by 3.2%, which is much more in line with what everybody else in the country is experiencing. And the big lift came from performance-related pay, otherwise known as bonuses. And some of these companies have delivered very good results, and the shareholders have voted these remuneration packages through.
OK, but not all of them.
No, I mean, there are some people who would probably crumble under severe questioning, but the big headline names that have been reported widely in the newspapers have delivered a lot of value for their shareholders and reaped the rewards.
Chris Roebuck here in the studio, it makes sense, doesn't it? If you're the leader of a company that's doing very, very well, you should get well paid for that.
Yeah, there's probably two issues that we need to consider. First of all is the degree to which the performance is actually related to how the organisation does, and that switches into the bonus payment, and also the degree to which we're seeing a divergence in the pay between the average worker and the chief executive. 10 years ago, FTSE 100 chief executives on average earned 60 times more than the average employee. That's now over 120. So the pay is diverging. So there's a question as to why is that happening? And the second question is, if we look at how these bonuses are paid in terms of the performance criteria that have to be met, some of them are not really as difficult as they should be. And some people are actually getting increases in remuneration purely because they can potentially find somebody else in the same industry who's getting paid more.
Sure. I mean, John Purcell, why the pay divergence in recent years? Why have we seen the pay of the bosses flying up, and yet the workers at the lower level, it's staying static and hardly going up at all?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and what has happened is that there's a lot of what's called benchmarking and peer reviewing. So you look at other people in the industry and similar industries at a similar level, and you say, well, what are they getting paid, and therefore what's competitive? Now, what's happened is people have taken the top end of that range and then called it the average, which if you keep doing it, it massively lifts the overall remuneration pool. So a little bit more realism about what the average actually is would be a big help. And also, as Professor Roebuck referred to just there, some of the targets that are being applied are really too easy. And we have an acronym called SMART targets to really focus people on working out what those things are that add value.
So, John, I mean, if you were looking for someone to lead a big company, and they said, well, I'll be expecting, I don't know, X amount of money, but you said, well, actually, the average for the industry is Y, you wouldn't have a chance of getting that person, would you?
Well, some people you're then in the game of negotiation, slightly like a game of chicken, and you've got to kind of work out how far you're prepared to go and how far you think the other person is prepared to go. And then these people are very smart and are good negotiators. That's why they are where they are. So it makes life somewhat complicated.
Indeed. I mean, Chris Roebuck, part of the problem is the makeup of remuneration committees, isn't it? I mean, a lot of them are people with vested interest. They're probably going to be people who might at a later stage become CEOs themselves or whatever. They've got a reason for wanting to keep the price high.
Yeah, and that links into what John quite correctly said, which is if a chief executive thinks that he has found somebody who's being paid more than he is, he employs a remuneration consultant. The remuneration consultant is paid to go out and find people who are paid more that can justify that chief executive being paid more. He's not going to be very happy if they suggest he should be paid less because his performance doesn't match. He then gets the justification from the consultants. He then goes to the REMCO, the Remuneration Committee, and says, look, these consultants say I should be paid more. The Remuneration Committee then has the option, do we agree or do we disagree? Those on the Remuneration Committee are often senior executives from other organisations, and maybe they don't want to rock the boat. or they are non-executive directors who should stand up to the chief executive, but know that if they stand up to the chief executive too much, they will cease to be non-executive directors in the future, and therefore there's not an interest to challenge them. And the ultimate test is the chief executive knows as long as he can get more than 50% of the shareholders to back him, actually the rest of the shareholders, as far as their view is concerned, it doesn't count, because if 49% say no and 51% say yes, he gets his pay increase.
Right.
Maybe we should be saying 2/3 of shareholders should approve executive remuneration.
All right, we'll leave it there. Chris Roebuck and John Purcell, thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Thank you.